As Ain awakens, he finds himself in an inn, carried there by Dill. To his surprise, Klon is by his bedside. Concerned about how long he might have been unconscious, Ain questions Klon, who reassures him that it was just a day-long nap. Amazed at the duration of his sleep, Ain jokingly questions if he's dreaming. Klon playfully pinches his cheek and sneaks in a smooch, teasingly stating that she was worried sick. Handing him a letter from the king, Klon reveals that there won't be any punishment this time, and Ain can participate in the investigation of the former Demon Lord's territory. Ain, anticipating some form of punishment regardless, reads the letter with a light-hearted tone. He expresses gratitude to Klon, who had reported everything accurately. Klon, curious about Ain's status card, checks for any changes. Ain discovers a new skill, Ice Dragon, and notes that Klon's prediction was off. He playfully suggests that it tasted more like a steak, adding a thumbs up and a wink. Klon smirks and laughs, while Ain takes pride in his newfound discovery. 2 days later, the group sets off for the Demon Lord continent. Lloyd notices that Ain's aura has become significantly more powerful since their battle with the Ice Dragon. Dill shares the adventurers' reactions, claiming that they believe Ain has the potential to surpass the first king. Despite the accolades, Ain remains humble and declines such lofty thoughts. As they continue their journey, a rare rabbit catches Ain's eye, but it speeds away before he can do anything. Seeing Ain's disappointment, Dill steps up, offering to hunt the elusive rabbit. With enthusiasm, he motivates the knights to continue their journey toward the Demon Lord territory. The prospect of a delicious rabbit dinner adds a touch of excitement to their adventure. As they ventured near the Demon Lord territory, Ain and the group noticed a presence watching them. Initially on high alert, they soon realized that whatever it was had no hostile intentions. Being close to the Demon Lord's domain, Ain observed structures that oddly resembled those in the capital, sparking his curiosity. Ain couldn't shake the feeling of warmth in the air, a sensation that puzzled him. Lloyd reassured him, pointing out the lack of signs of typical environmental elements like animals, wind, or snow. The former Demon Lord territory, untouched for centuries, seemed frozen in time. However, Ain's keen observation led him to a startling revelation: the Demon Lord's castle bore an uncanny resemblance to the capital's castle, leaving him genuinely surprised. Feeling a mix of emotions, Ain sensed an unexpected connection with the Lich and Dullahan within him, almost like being at home. To settle this peculiar feeling, he casually mentioned that he was home, accompanied by his spectral companions. A mysterious gust of wind swept through, and, magically, the gate before them swung open, creating an atmosphere of ease. As the day unfolded, they established their camp in the area. Despite the unfamiliar surroundings, Ain found comfort in the bed provided, appreciating the luxury over a mere tent. He couldn't resist commenting on the magical conveniences at their disposal. In the tranquility of the camp, a sudden clank of armor caught Ain's attention. Curious, he ventured out, only to discover 2 skillfully captured rabbits, the Yatsume Usagi, placed right outside his tent. Lloyd, investigating the peculiar occurrence, marveled at the flawless execution of the rabbit's presentation, emphasizing the precision of a single cut to the neck. Dill, eager to unravel the mystery, pondered who might be behind this, while the guards remained vigilant. As Ain cheerfully embraces the idea of a warm welcome, Dill, on the other hand, maintains a concerned and serious demeanor about the situation. While they prepare the Yatsume Usagi for dinner, Ain, being cautious, thoroughly checks for any signs of poison, finding none. With a plan to boost the knights' morale, Ain decides to share this rare meal with everyone. The feast goes on, and laughter fills the air as everyone enjoys the meal together. Hours later, Ain, now stuffed to the brim, starts to wake up, questioning his surroundings. Recalling the previous night, he realizes he must have overindulged and fallen asleep in his tent. However, to his surprise, a stranger in knight's armor appears, remarking that it's his room. This mysterious figure introduces himself as Marco, the vice-captain of the Dark Knights affiliated with the Demon Lord, and, quite notably, an undead, more specifically, a living suit of armor. Ain finds himself unexpectedly taken captive, a situation he realizes others likely haven't noticed yet. Feeling the strength of the knight before him, he clenches his fist, knowing he's facing a formidable opponent. Surveying his surroundings, Ain notices the scenery outside the window, deducing he's likely within the castle grounds, seemingly trapped. Nervously anticipating the knight's next move, Ain is surprised when he's offered a cup of tea instead. Seated and bewildered, Ain tries to make sense of the situation. The knight, whom Ain learns is named Marco, explains that the tea is made from leaves of the ancient elder tree, valued for its age of nearly thousands of years. Uncertain how to address Marco, Ain hesitates, but Marco suggests simply calling him by his name. Ain presses Marco for answers about his sudden capture, and Marco promises to explain once they've both enjoyed their tea. Realizing his immunity to poison, Ain takes a sip and is pleasantly surprised by the delicious flavor, much to Marco's satisfaction. Marco reveals that he brought Ain to warn him about the instability of his vessel, cautioning against using his phantom hands in the area. Perplexed, Ain listens as Marco explains the risk of the core going out of control, similar to what happened with the previous demon lord. Marco emphasizes that the curse of the beasts in the area hasn't completely faded. Curious, Ain wonders aloud if Marco is referring to the red foxes. At the mention of the red foxes, Marco visibly trembles, unable to speak their name due to their curse. He apologizes and explains that the tea Ain drank had the effect of blocking the curse. Realizing that Marco harbors no ill will towards him and doesn't see him as an enemy, Ain feels relieved. Marco mentions that Ain's comrades must be worried about him, prompting him to guide Ain outside. As they stroll past the buildings, Ain realizes he's not inside the Demon Lord castle. Marco advises him that if he wants to enter the castle, he'll need to wait until Ain's vessel has matured. Ain, feeling concerned about Marco's solitude, inquires if he feels lonely. Although Marco appreciates the sentiment, he explains that he has an important mission to fulfill, which Ain understands. Shifting the conversation, Marco expresses his curiosity about the red foxes and suggests heading south to learn more. He reveals that after the Great War, the red foxes set sail from a remote southern port, secretly preparing a ship during the conflict. Marco remarks on their cunning nature, and suddenly, dark hands envelop him, making him appear unstable and erratic. Despite this, Marco manages to speak and utters, "Wonderful species," which surprises Ain. Ain questions if the Demon Lord was tricked, leading to chaos in the world. As Marco behaves strangely, he warns Ain not to say anything, emphasizing the red fox's fondness for chaos. Suddenly, Marco grabs his sword and injects himself in the leg, experiencing a sense of relief. Ain, feeling puzzled by Marco's behavior, asks what happened. Marco explains that it's the curse of the red foxes, which robs individuals of their rationality and drives them berserk. He warns Ain to be cautious. Adding to the intrigue, Marco reveals the red foxes hold a grudge against Ishtalika royalty and seek Ain's return. This revelation leaves Ain pondering the history between Ishtalika, the royalty, and the red foxes. As they approach a giant gate, Marco informs Ain that he can return to his camp by heading straight ahead. He hands Ain a box, explaining it contains materials to craft a sword, much to Ain's gratitude. Curious about Marco's motives, Ain asks why he's helping despite being Ishtalika royalty. Marco, standing formally, asserts that serving the royalty is natural for a knight, leaving Ain still curious. Ain wonders if Marco, with his actions, embodies the creed of a knight, despite the Demon Lord army being considered Ishtalika's enemy. Ain's curiosity leads him to inquire about the investigation unit's safety during their visits to the Demon Lord castle. Marco reveals a promise made to protect the area's inhabitants, a vow passed down from the previous Demon Lord, Ash. Marco stresses the importance of getting along with everyone, shedding light on his sense of duty and honor as a knight. Ain, surprised by Marco's revelation about the red foxes and their grudge, is amused when Marco shares a favorite phrase of the Demon Lord. Ain laughs, understanding the need to protect such peculiar beings. As Ain leaves, Marco bids him farewell, cautioning him to be careful. Recalling that Marco was the one who hunted the Yatsume Usagi, Ain compliments the delicious meal, expressing gratitude. Marco, appreciative of Ain's words, bows in return. Rejoining Lloyd and Dill, Ain explains his kidnapping, leaving them spooked and ready to face punishment. However, Ain, impressed by the monster's chivalry, forgives them, noting the similarity to the first king's no-invasion rule. Ain feels a strange connection to the Demon Lord. Back in Baltic, Ain and Klon open the box from Marco. Klon suggests it might be a parting gift, and Ain, jokingly imagining something alarming, realizes it's harmless. The curious duo contemplates the contents of the box. Ain excitedly realizes he can make a sword from the contents of the box. Klon, quick-witted, has already arranged for a blacksmith, thanks to an introduction from the Count. Ain praises Klon's efficiency, suggesting they meet the renowned blacksmith. On their way to the blacksmith's shop in Baltic, Ain is surprised by the eerie atmosphere. Lloyd, cautious, positions Dill at the entrance. Ain, eager to seek a favor, insists on a polite greeting. Upon entering, Ain encounters two bickering individuals, both absorbed in arguing about hammer swings. When Ain captures their attention, an unexpected dark atmosphere envelops the scene. Realizing Ain's royal status, the blacksmiths quickly apologize for the messy state of their shop, but Ain brushes it off. Muten, the blacksmith, reveals that they've had no customers for 3 years, and the only recent visitor sought shelter from the rain. As business talks commence, Muten inquires about Ain's request. Ain presents the material for the sword, and Muten, upon inspecting it, discovers it's the helmet of a living armor, the same helmet Marco wore. Ain is surprised, but Muten, relying on a blacksmith's hunch, recognizes it. Explaining that living armor shed their skin only once in their lifetime, leaving behind the helmet, Muten deems it a precious material. He agrees to take on the job but warns Ain about the high cost of processing such unique material, requiring the use of a special magic stone furnace. Imim, Muten's student, praises Ain for bringing such a high-class material. Klon bravely ventures into the realm of costs, asking Muten for an estimate. Muten suggests around 5 million, a figure that doesn't seem too outrageous to Ain. But then, Klon steps in with a staggering 50 million, adding another 20 million for service, totaling a whopping 70 million. Ain's jaw practically hits the floor at the mention of such a price. Taking a moment to recover from the sticker shock, Ain pulls Klon aside to voice his concerns. Despite being the crown prince, he's not exactly swimming in cash. Klon, with a knowing smile, reveals that Ain hasn't been reaping the rewards of his heroic deeds, including subjugating the sea dragon. To her, 70 million is a steal compared to what Ain truly deserves. Though still hesitant, Ain finds himself outnumbered as the others eagerly support the deal. Lloyd then chimes in with a practical suggestion, using material from the sea dragon for the sword's hilt. Muten agrees, but alas, the material is in the capital. Lloyd volunteers to fetch it, ensuring only the finest is selected, although Muten would prefer to handle the task himself if it didn't entail a trek to the capital from Baltic, a trip he'd rather avoid. Klon, ever the ingenious thinker, proposes that Muten craft the sword in the capital instead. Being the granddaughter of the chairman of August Company, she assures Muten that her family's business can cover all expenses. Plus, crafting in the capital would give Muten the advantage of choosing materials until he's completely satisfied. Ain can't help but admire Klon's prowess. Not only is she excelling as his aide, but she's also a master negotiator for her family's business. After some negotiation, Muten relents, handing over a scroll and granting Klon full authority, promising to foot the bill for land, houses, and a brand new furnace. Although Ain questions the necessity of such lavish conditions, Muten insists it's vital, especially since his current shop sees little foot traffic. With everyone on board, Muten pledges to forge Ain the finest sword fit for a highness, leaving Ain eagerly anticipating the outcome. As the discussion wraps up, Ain can't help but marvel at how smoothly everything fell into place. But when they inspect the letter Muten gave them, they're stunned by the jaw-dropping amount listed, raising doubts about Muten's legitimacy. Later in the evening, the king throws a party to honor the crown prince and the knights for their commendable efforts. Ain finds himself surrounded by nobles showering him with praise for his accomplishments. Though overwhelmed, he maintains composure, deflecting credit to Lloyd and the royal guards, and impressing the nobles with his humility. His mother jokes that the party might not be a sufficient reward for his achievements, teasing that his father would be displeased without it. Amidst the festivities, Ain's attention is drawn to an elf hiding behind a pillar, seeking advice. His mother reveals that the elf is nervous to approach, considering Ain's prolonged absence. Eager to help, Ain proposes speaking to her, and his mother approves. Approaching Christina, Ain invites her to the terrace to cool off, and she promptly agrees. While on the terrace, Ain notices Christina has let her hair down and compliments her on the change, expressing regret that he can't see her like this more often. Christina blushes in embarrassment at the unexpected compliment. Ain, curious about Christina's well-being, engages in a conversation with her. She shares that everything is normal and peaceful in the castle, with Kadima being lively, and the sea dragon twins remaining as adorable as ever. However, she confesses that she was worried sick when Ain was away fighting elsewhere. Christina admits to feeling helpless and questioning why she couldn't accompany him. She describes the heartbreak of being left behind. Ain, teasingly mentioning that she's a marshal and not meant for him to monopolize, doesn't seem to convince Christina, who only wants to protect him. Overwhelmed by her emotions, Christina sheds tears and apologizes for being selfish. As she attempts to excuse herself, Ain takes hold of her hand, his mind working on a plan. Despite all his accomplishments, he feels he hasn't rewarded himself enough. With a smirk, he decides to claim the rewards that have been accumulating, leaving Christina in suspense about his intriguing plan. Ain met with his grandparents, who were the king and queen. He thanked them for meeting him late at night, and the king understood that Ain wanted to claim the rewards that had accumulated. Ain, with Chris by his side, wondered if it was okay for her to be there. The king approved and then inquired about Ain's desired rewards. Before stating his requests, Ain asked the king to reward Lloyd. Ain explained that Lloyd played a crucial role in preventing casualties during the battle against Upas Kamui. Ain also mentioned how Lloyd lost his title for failing to stop Ain from leaving earlier. Despite this, Ain felt it was time to let go of the past and wished for Lloyd to be reinstated as the marshal. The king acknowledged Lloyd's recent accomplishments but pointed out that Chris currently held the position. Ain understood this but suggested that Chris would step down once Lloyd was reinstated. Ain then requested Chris to become his and Ain's mother's personal bodyguard. I thought he was going to ask Chris as his waifu. The king couldn't believe Ain was asking to bring back a former marshal just for his own convenience. With a fierce look, the king told him to stop talking nonsense. When Warren tried to discuss the matter with him, he ordered him to wait until he finished talking to the king, speaking in a threatening voice. Feeling the pressure from Ain, Warren quickly apologized. Even though Ain's request seemed unreasonable, he argued that it was for Ishtalika's sake, which made the king flustered. He explained that Lloyd could only use his full power as a marshal, while Chris's personality and abilities were better suited for escorting. He insisted that putting them in their appropriate positions would be the best solution. The king knew it was a valid argument but tried to say something until the queen stopped him, agreeing that Ain's proposal made sense. The king then instructed Warren to prepare the paperwork. He officially relieved Chris of her position as marshal and appointed her as Ain's and Olivia's bodyguard. With a smile, he encouraged her to do her best. She kneeled as she accepted her new role, and everyone in the room, especially Ain, smiled at her. Ain and Chris left the room, and he expressed gratitude to Chris for supporting him. Chris apologized, feeling bad for making Ain use his rewards for her sake. He assured her it was okay because it was something he wanted. Chris felt her heart race, realizing how much he had grown. Ain, with a smile, agreed and approached her, playfully claiming he would soon be taller than her. Flustered, she stepped back, and Ain apologized, sensing her discomfort. Maybe Chris thought Ain was going to kiss her? Despite the sudden closeness, Chris was fine with it and asked Ain a favor. Summoning courage, she requested him to call her simply Chris. Ain looked confused, making her sad. Eventually, he decided to address her by her first name, making her happy. After realizing the awkwardness of their situation, they parted ways. 3 months later, Ain visited Muten in Amim's smithy to obtain Muten's greatest masterpiece ever. He proudly held up his new partner, noticing it tremble. Muten explained it was a sign of the sword's loyalty, exclusively crafted for him. He observed how effortlessly the sword responded to his movements as if it was following his will. Klon and Chris complimented Ain on how great he looked with the new sword. Since Muten hadn't tested its sharpness yet, he asked Ain to cut the sea dragon's spine, known for being tough compared to Isalika's ships. He worries it might break, but to everyone's surprise, with a light tap, the sea dragon's spine was sliced in half like butter. The astonishment spread, with even the blacksmith himself unable to comprehend the sword's sharpness. Realizing the sword lacked a name, Muten asked him to give it one. He smiled, looking at the sword, and decided to ask Marco for suggestions when they met again since he was the one who provided the sword's main material. Meanwhile, the living armor, Marco, experienced sudden and intense pain. Strangely, he enthusiastically praised someone as a wonderful person, almost like a maniac. Grabbing a bottle, he poured its contents over himself. Steam rose from his body, and he burst into laughter. He mocked the beast that tried to take control, as he managed to resist their influence. Marco insisted that his mission wasn't complete, and he had to wait for Ain to return. While gazing at the night sky, Marco commended himself for a job well done. However, he quietly acknowledged that it was all thanks to the wonderful person. Unfortunately, it appeared that he had finally succumbed to their control. The following day, Ain sighed. Chris was worried that she might get involved and lose her magic stone. He reassured her, asking her not to be too vigilant. The previous night, while he was asleep, his roots accidentally extended, almost extracting his Aunt Katima's magic stone as she passed by. Despite the close call, he assured Chris that he didn't extract his aunt's magic stone and had no interest in doing that to others. However, Chris felt conflicted about Ain. At that moment, Gil entered the room with a letter from the king, Ain's grandfather. The letter mentioned the death anniversary of the previous king and ordered Ain to visit the grave. He remembered that this was a duty his grandfather performed every year. Gil explained that it was now his responsibility as he had become an adult and would be the future king of Ishtalika. He hesitated, thinking about his upcoming role as king, leaving Chris puzzled. Shortly after, he and his grandfather paid a visit to a graveyard. He felt solemn as he gazed at the resting place of the previous kings of Ishtalica. His grandfather directed him to the far end, where the first king, Jael von Ishtalica, lay at rest. They stopped in front of the slate marking the previous king's grave. Ain's grandfather instructed him to observe and follow his actions. As a sign of respect, they were to hold their swords in front of their chests and make a bow. He followed the instructions, and suddenly, his sword started shining. Apologizing, he explained that the sword reacted to human bones, and the king believed that undead materials possessed that kind of power. Witnessing the reaction, he felt assured that his father's remains were indeed secure in the grave. Curiously, Ain then asked his grandfather about the qualities of a king. The king was impressed that Ain was contemplating such matters at his age. He mentioned hearing about it from Marco. The king shared his definition, stating that being a king meant having control over the life and death of one's people. He emphasized that a king's words carry great weight, and a self-centered person is unworthy of such responsibility. Ain doubted himself, but the king reassured him that he had plenty of time to grow, and they returned to the castle. That same night, he entered the throne room and gazed at the king's seat, recalling his grandfather's words clearly and pondering deeply. Suddenly, Chris appeared and warned him about the dangers of being in the throne room because of the demon lord's magic stone. He apologized, as he was contemplating whether he had the qualifications to become a king. Observing Ain's expression, Chris approached him and took Ain's hand, placing it on her chest. She declared that she was dedicating her magic stone to him. He was surprised by the sudden booba grabbing, but Chris explained that it was a sign of respect and affection among elves. "Yeah, right, Miss Elf." She then asked if she could also place her hand on his chest, revealing that an elf's magic stone was located on their right chest. Chris promised to always stand by Anya, regardless of his position as a king. Touched by her words, he realized that it was always Chris who saved him and expressed his gratitude for her support. Unknown to them, two old men were observing from a distance. The king found Chris trustworthy, and Lloyd agreed. However, they both remembered that the ancient elf ritual Chris performed held a different meaning. Lloyd couldn't help but sigh as he watched his grandson, who seemed to be unknowingly building a harem. It had been another training day for the knights, and Ain decided to observe. Despite witnessing the events the previous night, Lloyd noticed Ain's radiant expression. He then approached and asked if he could join the training, specifically requesting Lloyd as his opponent. They faced off, and he assured Lloyd that he wouldn't hold back, promising to use his full power. As they clashed, he unleashed a powerful attack with two dragon auras behind him. Lloyd, feeling the weight of the strike, groaned and dug his feet into the ground. An explosion followed, scattering dust and rubble across the training grounds. When the dust settled, Ain was panting but expressed gratitude to Lloyd for helping him confirm his current abilities. Lloyd was pleased to have been of assistance. Afterward, Ain left, leaving Gil in disbelief at what he had just witnessed. Suddenly, Lloyd, feeling in pain, fell to the ground, exclaiming about the terrifying strength of Ain. He believed that their future king would continue to grow stronger. Ain, with determination in his heart, made his way to the king's grave, holding a bunch of flowers tightly. Upon spotting his grandfather there, he couldn't help but wonder about the reason behind his presence. The king, seeming to anticipate Ain's arrival, inquired if Ain had finally realized the qualities required of a king. Ain confirmed this, expressing his belief that he was on the right path and wanting to share this newfound understanding with the first king. His grandfather, though admitting to never losing respect for the first king, confessed to feeling envious of his myriad accomplishments. Nevertheless, he expressed his belief in Ain's potential to become a king akin to the first one. As the king departed, he reminded Ain to observe proper etiquette in the cemetery, to which Ain assured his understanding. With determination, Ain continued forward, kneeling respectfully before the first king's grave. Placing the flowers and a sword as a sign of reverence, Ain expressed his admiration for the first king, acknowledging his past recklessness. Yet, with the support of those around him, Ain resolved not to let his admiration remain mere words. Before the first king's resting place, Ain declared his intent to surpass him, apologizing for the sudden visit before taking his leave. As Ain walked away, puzzled by his sword's lack of glow, he realized he had missed something crucial. Rushing back to the first king's grave, he apologized and drew his sword, but still, there was no glow. It dawned on him that the first king's remains were not where they should be. Stunned, he let his sword slip from his grasp, realizing that the first king's homeland was elsewhere, not where he had thought. That night, Ain, visibly tired, sifted through books in the library with determination. Klon, noticing his exhaustion, gently suggested he rest. She then briefed him on the territory left behind by Viscount Seiji, managed by the royalty in his absence. Ain considered if Klon would accompany him, but she explained her upcoming duties with Olivia and Chris. Realizing only Dill would join him, he inquired about the territory's location, finding it conveniently situated between Ista and Baltic. Though Klon seemed puzzled by his interest, he brushed it off, entrusting her to care for his mother during their trip. During the official visit to Viscount Seiji's territory, Ain mingled with the locals, exchanging warm greetings and smiles. As the visit concluded, he boarded the water train, where Dill advised him to rest before reaching the capital. Handing Dill a letter from the royal family, marked as important, Ain sent him off to deliver it, eager to see what awaited him in the capital. Unexpectedly, the train departed ahead of schedule, leaving Dill curious about the letter's contents. Ain revealed they were on their way to Baltic for a secret investigation, keeping it under wraps from the king. Despite Dill's sigh, he reminded Ain to rest before reaching their destination. Ain pondered why Dill didn't try to dissuade him, realizing it would likely be a futile effort. With surprise and a laugh, he expressed gratitude for having Dill as his companion. During the journey, Ain succumbed to a deep sleep. Abruptly awakened by the sound of a sword scabbard, he assumed they had arrived in Baltic. However, he found himself in a meadow facing a long-haired swordsman urging him to get up for training. Questioning the man's identity, Ain soon recognized Dullahan, and behind him stood Elder Leech. The unexpected turn of events left Ain both puzzled and intrigued. As Ain found himself facing the mighty Ramza and Misty, he briefly questioned if his body had been commandeered. However, the duo, now known as Ramza and Misty, reassured him that he was still in control. Ramza, in his Gigachad glory, swiftly handed Ain a set of armor, the Dullahan's armor, to be exact, declaring it alone to prevent Ain from meeting an untimely demise. Ain, with concern, noted that Ramza wasn't adorned in armor himself. The Gigachad simply brushed it off, claiming a child's sword wouldn't reach him anyway. Frustrated but determined, Ain stood up, grasped his sword, and charged towards Ramza, initiating their training. Meanwhile, Kadima, in another corner of the world, conducted an experiment on a caged bee monster. Feeding it a magic stone, she witnessed its rapid growth, similar to a Pokémon evolving. The monster took a brief nap after its transformation. Kadima, contemplating Ain's monsterization, likened it to evolution and pondered whether Ain needed a fire stone or a water stone to trigger his transformation. The mystery of what Ain might become lingered in her thoughts. In Ain's dream, Ramza swiftly bested him in under a minute, showcasing his incredible skills. Misty chimed in, highlighting Ramza's past feat of effortlessly slicing a sea dragon while simultaneously healing Ain. The sword clashes revealed Ain's limited swordsmanship talent. Ramza, acknowledging Ain's hard work, suggested that Ain's strength lay more in utilizing his phantom hands, fighting akin to a monster. Despite this, Ramza wished for Ain to develop techniques and not solely rely on raw power, especially against a specific opponent. Sensing Anya's confusion, Misty nudged Ramza to offer clearer advice. Ramza, taking on a fatherly tone, insisted that, in his eyes, Anya was still a child. He proceeded to provide tips on sword handling, pointing out Anya's tendency to try finishing a fight with a single swing. Anya admitted to the mistake, and Ramza continued to guide him, creating a unique connection. Anya pondered if this was the sensation of having a father, while Misty watched proudly, resembling a content mother. After some sparring, Ramza noted Ain's improvement and declared that the real training was about to commence. He instructed Ain to observe his sword technique and contemplate how to counter it. In the blink of an eye, Ramza appeared before Ain, who, despite the surprise, managed to defend against the attack. Ain followed the sword movements, realizing they were gentler than Ramza's earlier strikes. Ramza, not finished yet, raised his sword high, exhibiting a knightly attitude distinct from Ishtalika's knights. Dodging Ramza's sword swings, Ain couldn't help but notice the incredible speed reminiscent of Lloyd and Chris combined. Determined, Ain pressed on, trying to control the flow of the fight. Despite his relentless attacks, Ramza effortlessly blocked each strike. Just as Ain spotted an opening for a decisive move, Misty called an end to the session, and everything vanished, armor and swords alike. Misty explained that she had alleviated the real fatigue from Ain's body. Despite the peculiar experience, Ain expressed gratitude to the couple. Ramza then casually mentioned that he had summoned Ain because he needed a favor. Curious about what he could do, Ramza revealed that Ain might encounter someone employing the same sword techniques. He requested Ain to deliver a message, withholding the specific details from the readers. Ain, looking surprised, nodded, and in the blink of an eye, Ramza disappeared. Ain awoke in his original body as the train arrived in Baltic. Dill informed him of their location, and Ain, with recent events fresh in his mind, clenched his fist. He headed out into the snowy part of Baltic, assuring Dill that their guide would appear soon. Suddenly, Ain sensed something and was taken aback to find Marco waiting near the city, emerging from behind a tree. As Marco appeared, Dill swiftly came to Ain's rescue, explaining Marco's undead status. However, Marco assured Dill he was expected. With a reassuring tap on Dill's shoulder, Ain agreed to follow Marco's lead. Marco observed Ain's determination and offered to guide them to the castle. Despite Dill's concerns about the Demon Lord's castle, Ain assured him they were just visiting a grave. Confirming the grave's location with Marco, they set off. Walking along, Ain comforted Dill, assuring him they wouldn't be attacked by monsters. Suddenly, they encountered a deadly poison swamp emitting purple smoke. Marco cautioned them to be careful, noting even Misty wouldn't dare approach it. A shiny object in the swamp caught Ain's attention, sparking his curiosity. Arriving at the Demon Lord's castle, Marco led them to a chamber, announcing their arrival at the grave's entrance. Before Ain entered, Marco shared a warning about a special room crafted by skilled individuals, expressing confidence in Ain's ability to overcome any challenges. With that, Ain prepared to enter the mysterious chamber, his curiosity piqued. Ain sensed something fishy. Watching Marco's peculiar behavior as he left the Demon Lord's castle, spouting cryptic phrases, Ain knew things were off. Playing it cool, Ain asked Dill to hang back while he stealthily tailed Marco back into the Great Hall. With a worried exhale, Dill cautioned Ain to stay on his toes. Pushing the door open, Ain stepped into a room straight out of a nightmare, complete with a foul stench. Suddenly, a chain rattled, and Ain's heart skipped a beat. Who lurked in the darkness? To his astonishment, he found a girl shackled to the grimy floor. His heart went out to her, and he rushed to assist. Terrified, the girl reached for Ain's help. Holding her trembling hands, he vowed to rescue her. But then, in a strange twist, she vanished into thin air before his eyes. Reappearing behind him, she implored him to love her, only to vanish again. Ain rubbed his eyes, wondering if it was a red fox curse playing tricks on him. Fatigue tugged at him, but he soldiered on, edging toward the next door. Swinging the door open, Ain stumbled upon a serene gazebo, housing 3 graves. Recognition dawned on him, and a grin spread across his face. With reverence, he approached the gravestones, struck by their familiar design. Placing some flowers, he greeted Ishtalika's first king, paying homage. And just as he suspected, his sword lit up, confirming his hunch. Reading the inscriptions, he uncovered the truth. Jael von Ishtalika wasn't the first king but the second, the child of Ramza and Misty. This land, labeled the Demon Lord's domain, was his true birthplace. Realizing the significance of the gravestones, Ain pieced together the puzzle. The first king wasn't just any monarch but the Demon Lord Ash, nestled between Ramza's and Misty's graves, all bearing the von Ishtalika name. Struggling to fathom that Jael might harm his own kin, Ain envisioned them together, unable to believe they could harbor hatred. The unity in their final resting places contradicted any notion of familial strife. Ain's eyes caught faded writings near the queen's name, and as he deciphered them, shock rippled through him, a familiar family name. Emerging from the room, Ain encountered Dill's concerned gaze. With assurance, Ain claimed to have gathered the necessary intel, instructing Dill not to interfere with what lay ahead. Together, they marched back to the Great Hall, where Marco loomed. With an eerie undertone, Marco probed if Ain had concluded his business. Ain affirmed, stating his intent to return to Baltic. Marco, offering to guide them further, inquired about Ain's experience. Ain, thinking Marco meant the grave, responded nonchalantly. Uninterested in the grave, Marco fixated on the craftsmanship, a creation of the revered figures he held in high esteem. Ain, clearly unimpressed with the palace, couldn't resist expressing his disdain, calling it the worst creation ever. Marco, taken aback by Ain's strong opinion, dismissed it as the wrong answer and questioned Ain's mental well-being. Dill, confused by Marco's reaction, was about to inquire, but Ain intervened, signaling him to wait. As if to address Ain's supposed mental state, Marco nonchalantly suggested medicine. Ain's response was far from grateful. Instead, he shot Marco an angry glare. Unexpectedly, Marco's demeanor shifted, and he entered a berserk state, surrounded by a dark aura, leaving everyone in suspense. As Marco's distressing scream echoed through the air, Dill sprang into action, ready to assist Ain. But our brave hero insisted on facing Marco alone, declaring it his battle to fight. With determination etched on his face, Ain prepared himself as Marco unsheathed his sword and lunged forward. The clash of their blades and the intensity of their gazes created a scene akin to a brewing storm, leaving Dill struggling to keep pace with their lightning-fast movements. In a fleeting moment of respite, Ain's mind raced as he realized that Marco's swordsmanship mirrored the very techniques he had encountered in his dream. Even in his monstrous form, Marco's skill with the blade remained unchanged. Channeling the guidance from Ramses' dreamlike instructions, Ain delivered a powerful strike that left a deep mark on Marco's armor, catching him off guard. Marco's reaction was one of disbelief, questioning the depth of his own loyalty and faith to those he held dear. In a sudden and shocking turn of events, Marco took matters into his own hands, quite literally, as he abruptly severed his own left arm. His tone shifted dramatically as he delved into a discussion about loyalty, leaving Ain and Dill bewildered by the sudden change. Just as quickly as the shift occurred, Marco reverted to his frenzied state, launching another relentless assault on Ain. The battle raged on, with twists and turns that kept everyone on the edge of their seats. As Ain continued to parry Marco's frenzied attacks, he desperately tried to reason with him, urging his friend to snap out of his crazed state. But Marco persisted, relentlessly insisting that Ain take some mysterious medicine. Growing increasingly frustrated by Marco's erratic behavior, Ain found himself at a loss. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoed in Ain's mind. Ramses' sage advice urged him to grant Marco some peace. Taking a deep breath, Ain steeled himself for what lay ahead. With determination burning in his eyes, he pushed back against Marco's relentless assault, offering himself as Marco's final opponent. As the castle trembled around them, Dill's anxiety heightened, but Ain remained focused on the task at hand. With each clash of their swords, Ain fought to unleash the hidden potential that Marco had seen within him. Dill watched in awe as something incredible began to unfold before his eyes. In a remarkable turn of events, Ain suddenly underwent a transformation, growing in size as his hair flowed majestically like something out of a shampoo commercial. With newfound agility, Ain swiftly maneuvered behind Marco, catching the living armor off guard. Despite Marco's valiant efforts to defend himself, Ain's decisive strike pierced through, striking his chest with precision. As the dust settled, Marco, now lucid once more, addressed Ain as his captain. Ain corrected him with a chuckle, asserting his role as captain. Marco, visibly shaken yet impressed, tapped Ain's shoulder, acknowledging the incredible growth he had witnessed. Though many memories remained lost due to his time as a living armor, Marco declined Ain's offer of magic stones for healing. Instead, he expressed contentment in being felled by the sword technique of his captain. Ain, asserting his authority, reminded Marco that it was his duty to follow orders. Marco, however, pushed back, claiming he had reached his limit and, with his captain no longer alive, desired some time off. Ain, recalling Ramses' favor, persuaded Marco to listen, and he reluctantly agreed. Ain then conveyed Ramses' words, praising Marco for successfully completing a mission spanning centuries. Initially silent, Marco eventually admitted he was glad, considering those words the greatest reward. In a sudden shift, Marco, curious about Ain's name, asked for it for the first time. Ain shared his full name, and Marco complimented its gallant nature. Bathed in the morning sunlight filtering through broken windows, Marco expressed a deep desire for Ain's name to echo throughout eternity. With a heartfelt wish for Ishtalika's honor, Marco's body vanished, leaving behind a magic stone that Ain absorbed. Nearby, Ain discovered a scroll, an order from Ramza to Marco, instructing him to protect their homeland. Ain realized that for hundreds of years, Marco had dutifully carried out Ramza's orders all on his own, experiencing the emotions of the loyal knight named Marco. Approaching Ain, Dill questioned if Ain truly was his master. Ain confirmed his identity, and Dill, feeling uneasy, noticed Ain had transformed into an adult, towering over him. Despite having some ideas, Dill decided to discuss it later upon their return to the capital. Suddenly, Ain spotted purple smoke, and the two ventured toward the poisonous swamp Marco had mentioned. Dill, wary of the obvious danger, voiced his concerns, but Ain's curiosity prevailed. Instructing Dill to stay behind, Ain extended his arm toward the purple swamp, parting the fog like Moses parting the seas. A flowery scent wafted from the swamp, and Ain suspected something at the center was releasing the poison. Walking atop the swamp's surface, Ain detoxified the water beneath each step. Amid the poisonous fog, he stumbled upon a sakura-colored blue fire rose, distinct from the norm. Suspecting it as the poison's source, Ain, ever the experimenter, pondered if he could crystallize it like the regular blue fire roses. Grabbing the flower, he successfully transformed it into a star crystal, deciding to bring this unique find home. Back in Baltic after a ride on the water train, Ain and Dill reached Ain's room. With a wish for a good rest, Dill departed, grappling with his perceived inadequacy despite being Ain's personal guard. Disappointed in himself, Dill resolved to surpass his father and become stronger. Meanwhile, Ain, concluding his inspection of his status card, faced a troublesome revelation. Anticipating this moment, he worried about breaking the news to others. Recalling Kadima's assumption that he would evolve into something extraordinary, Ain felt a cold sweat, realizing he had indeed evolved into someone exceptional, perhaps even resembling the Demon Lord. Meanwhile, Olivia, Klon, and Chris protested in front of the king because Aang hadn't returned home as planned in the morning. The king, feeling flustered, tried to calm the upset women. His grandson had given him a headache by taking an unexpected detour. Suddenly, Martha burst into the room, announcing that Aang had returned. Olivia worried about her son's safety, but Martha couldn't provide any details. All eyes then turned to the entrance. Aang casually declared his return, even though he had grown in size. Everyone in the throne room, except his ecstatic mother, was shocked. The surprise was so great that everyone screamed in astonishment. Everyone was forcefully sent outside, and the king had a one-on-one conversation with Aang. The king instructed him to address the others' questions later. He then asked Aang how he had ended up with an adult's body and what he had done in Baltic. As an Ishtalika, Aang explained everything to his grandfather. The king was visibly shocked and couldn't believe what he had just heard. He found it absurd that the first king was, in fact, the demon lord they had claimed to have defeated through generations. He didn't even know that the remains of the first king were not in their cemetery. The king then wondered if Dil knew about the Ishtalika's secrets, but Aang claimed Dil had only seen him fight Marco. The king instructed Aang not to discuss the topic with anyone and planned to forbid Dil from revealing the things he had seen. The discussion shifted to Aang's sudden growth, prompting him to hand over his status card to the king. As the king perused the information, his eyes widened, and a sudden headache gripped him. Concerned, Aang shared that, despite his newfound stature as a demon lord, he felt relatively unchanged, except for one minor issue: his clothes were getting uncomfortably tight. The king, relieved that the matter wasn't more ominous, couldn't help but chuckle at Aang's nonchalant attitude. Amidst the awkward silence, the king decided it was time for a wardrobe update and instructed Aang to summon all the town's merchants for a clothing spree. Aang contemplated how to explain his sudden transformation, and the king advised him to attribute it to the absorption of a magic stone, weaving a tale about enhanced dryad power causing rapid growth. Aang, curious about his new abilities, planned to consult his Aunt Kadima for more insights later. Martha soon delivered a fresh set of clothes for Aang, and after she left, he decided to reveal his changed appearance to the girls. Summoning Klon and Chris, who had been eavesdropping behind the door, Aang gave them the go-ahead to approach. The girls cautiously inspected Aang, even resorting to sniffing him to confirm his identity. Satisfied, they joined Aang, and as they played with his long hair, they suggested styling or trimming it. The evening passed in light-hearted camaraderie. Later, to Olivia's surprise, she discovered Aang peacefully napping on the couch, accompanied by Klon and Chris. The trio had found an unexpected moment of harmony. In a distant realm and a different era, an individual found themselves within a cave, grappling with amnesia and a skeletal form. Along came a woman named Misty Sylvia, who, upon recognizing the skeletal figure, assumed it had transformed into a monster due to some miasma after being abandoned as a slave. Undeterred, she greeted the skeleton and, sensing its need for assistance, offered a magic stone from her bag. As the skeleton consumed the magical stone, Misty observed the cave's instability and proposed they leave together. Feeling the pangs of loneliness during her travels, Misty decided to name the skeleton Ramza, and the two embarked on various adventures. Over time, Ramza experienced a transformation, gaining flesh and resembling a handsome human. During their journey, they encountered a hungry child, and after sharing their food, Misty speculated the kid might be a succubus, despite her small size. The confident little girl corrected them, asserting that she would grow rapidly. She explained that she was abandoned for lacking wings and a tail. Misty and Ramza, exchanging glances, extended an invitation to the girl, asking her to join their adventures. Curious about the girl's name, Misty discovered she didn't have one. Ramza suggested naming her, just as Misty did for him. Misty decided on the name Ash, and the girl joyfully embraced her new identity. The trio continued their adventures, building a unique bond in their peculiar journey through the realms. The trio's adventures continued, filled with monster slaying, aiding various beings, and gathering a diverse group of companions. Eventually, they founded a town with residents spanning different races and species. In the midst of their journey, Ash found herself at odds with one of Misty's ideas. Pouting, she argued that Misty, with her intimidating appearance and stern demeanor, was better suited to lead. Ramza, however, insisted that Ash, being the strongest among them, deserved the title of a demon lord. He believed she was the perfect candidate for leadership, a sentiment shared by others. Misty proposed a compromise, suggesting that Ash could sit on the throne while receiving support from both her and Ramza. Feeling like a simple succubus compared to Ramza's evolution into a Dullahan and Misty's transformation into an elder lich, Ash expressed her worries. She feared failure would lead to her companion's resentment and a loss of will to live. Seeing Ash distressed, Misty reassured her, emphasizing their familial bond and urging her not to worry too much. To solidify their connection, Misty proposed creating a family name. Ramza recalled Misty using Sylvia on a whim, and Ash agreed that it didn't feel right. Misty suggested Lakwa, meaning family in the language of the gods, but Ash found it hard to pronounce. After a brief discussion, Misty settled on Lika. The trio smiled at each other, marking the birth of Ishtalika, a name that would resonate through their epic adventures. Right now, we're caught up with the present chapters, and if there's an update, I'll make sure to continue the story. In the meantime, you can watch similar manga recaps like this on my channel. If you enjoyed this video, give this a big thumbs up, it would mean a lot, thank you.